To bring in, if we can, as we continue to follow this story, former NDP leader Tom Mulcair, nowadays CTV News political analyst. Tom, in Montreal, what do you think about this?
Hi, Todd. Well, I think that the word you just used, bombshell, is not an exaggeration in this particular case. Gerald Butts wasn't just Justin Trudeau's right-hand man. He was his right hemisphere. He decided everything around him. You know, there's this standard form where a political party leader or a prime minister looks at the caucus and says, when my chief of staff or my principal advisor talks to you, I'm talking to you. Mr. Trudeau never had to say that about Gerald Butts because everybody knew that Gerald Butts was that person. So for him to resign saying he did nothing wrong, I think indicates clearly that they know an accusation is coming. She has probably received a legal opinion from former Supreme Court Justice Cromwell, who's her lawyer right now, saying, you can talk about that part of it. You can't talk about cabinet confidences or secrets, but you can certainly talk about that. That would have been my view, because I think that any secrecy there had been lifted by the people around Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Trudeau himself the minute they started talking about it. So that's the situation they were in. Mr. Trudeau must be on bended knee, hoping that she only names Gerald Butts, because he gets to look at it and say, he's gone. But that simply brings it back to Mr. Trudeau, because Mr. Butts was working for Mr. Trudeau that whole time, and of course speaking for and on his behalf, Todd.
Do you think there's any chance, Tom, that we're going to hear in any way, shape, or form from Gerald Butts beyond this resignation letter?
Look, we went through this exercise last week where we had the Liberal-stacked Justice Committee looking to do anything but deliver justice in this file. They were given a clear mandate to stonewall and to block everything. Tomorrow, it's supposed to be behind closed doors. Now, it's interesting because the chair of that committee, Anthony Housefather, last week was giving out his own theories that Jody Wilson-Raybould didn't speak enough French. I don't know where he got that one, but that was the most recent invention from people trying to deflect and distract in this story. He's supposed to chair this thing tomorrow. By the way, in the same interview in Montreal, he said that he believes what Mr. Trudeau is saying and the people around him. So, I mean, it looks like, as far as he's concerned, there's nothing to investigate. Look at the timing of this, how bad this is in terms of political communication. We're a Monday, the House is not sitting, it's quiet, this bombshell arrives, and guess what? It's going to be the only subject for the next week. So how is it that the Liberals are so disorganized when we've become quite used to a fairly well-run show? I think that coming in the wake of the Huawei disaster, with Canada playing that secondary role to the United States and keeping that senior executive from Huawei in house arrest in Vancouver, I think that added on top of it is this current disaster. There have been other iterations in the past few weeks where we've just been watching a show where the Liberals have been showing that they're not that good at these things. It's not a very well-run government. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems they have, because we are in an election year, and this sense that they're not in control of the agenda and they're having trouble piloting the country, I think that that's going to start to stick with Canadian voters in this election year, Todd.
You mentioned it's quiet, and of course, as you know, Tom, it is a holiday in 8 out of the 10 provinces, except for Quebec and Newfoundland.
That's right.
Right?
So you had no trouble getting me into studio today. I was at a conference of the Canadian Club in Montreal today.
So let me just read something to you. I mean, Gerald Butts is very clear here, Tom. He says, I categorically deny the accusation that I or anyone else in the office pressured Ms. Wilson-Raybould. We honored the unique role of the Attorney General. Any accusation that I or the staff put pressure on the Attorney General is simply not true. I mean, that would be very categorical in terms of the way that it's written here.
Yes.
He's not leaving any sort of wiggle room.
No, and they weren't leaving any sort of wiggle room, Todd, when they said that Bob Fife's story in the Globe and Mail was not true. Guess what? Turns out that that story is probably going to be confirmed, and that's why we're seeing such scurrying of so many people trying to leave the ship right now before the thing goes down. Look, they're in trouble. I mean, at the beginning of this one, everybody who knew anything about politics on the inside was saying, oof, this is a real mess. Now everybody in Canada realizes just how big a mess this is. It pits a lot of things in Quebec Inc. against a perception in the rest of Canada. A lot of Quebec commentators are saying, oh, if that had been in Ontario, this thing would have been fixed a long time ago. There's a sense on both sides of the classic divide, of both solitudes, that something's amiss. And that's also going to play havoc with Mr. Trudeau's numbers as we head into this campaign.
All right, let me ask you about that and tap into your expertise on the ground in Quebec, being a longtime politician there, provincially, federally. Justin Trudeau, of course, runs and wins in the riding of Papineau, not far away from where your old riding was of Outremont. And
Next door.
there
Next
we
door,
go,
yeah.
and becomes the leader of the party, then becomes the prime minister. Gerald Butts, so key to that whole campaign, as you're saying, not his right-hand man, but his right hemisphere. Now we are the middle of February, Tom, and there is an election coming up in October. What is this going to do for the Liberal strategy, do you think?
Well, I think that the Liberals have got a lot of their hopes pinned on taking back Outremont, which is the riding I won 4 times for the NDP, and that's a big battle going on. No one's betting the farm on this one, but it does look like the Liberals are doing quite well. The NDP is putting up a valiant fight. We'll see what the result is on Monday. For Burnaby South, of course, everybody's expecting Mr. Singh to be able to hold on to a riding that's been NDP for the better part of 50 years. And again, if Mr. Trudeau can reap some rewards in some of these by-elections, it might put a better smile on his face for next week. But for this week, it's going to be very, very difficult for the Liberals and for Prime Minister Trudeau. People just don't believe what they've been hearing, all this very mean-spirited negative spin against Jody Wilson-Raybould. Oh, you know, I'm puzzled by her behavior. She's not being consistent in what she's saying. Those are all very negative, very personal things. And I'm sure she didn't take to them very kindly, but she's shown a lot of ability to rise above it, to be very stoic, but she's also going at it in a very determined way, getting legal advice. And that legal advice will, I believe, lead to her being able to talk very publicly about certain aspects of this case. So stay tuned, because if Mr. Butts says he didn't do anything wrong, just like all the rest of the people in the PMO did nothing wrong, well, maybe they all did the same thing wrong in that case, and we'll find out what exactly that is, at least in Jody Wilson-Raybould's estimation.
Wonderful to have you, Tom. Thank you.
All the best, Todd. Take care.